Greetings. I've got a video here. I just want to share something about checking yourself, no capping. For those of you who are not teenagers or younger, it just basically, another way of putting it is honest self evaluation. Um, I'm going to share something about Star Trek, kind of a little case study on an episode. And yeah, it's going to relate to a couple other videos I've done before. So let's start with it. What I mean by self-evaluation is, or self-assessment. Um, Maybe you know somebody, or you are the kind of person who just has a hard time admitting, or just looking at yourself honestly and saying, "Wow, um, maybe I'm not quite right about something." Or maybe I made a mistake there. And we have a hard time admitting that to ourselves or out loud or to other people. And maybe we have a hard time even being honest with ourselves and others about when we evaluate ourselves in our own assessment. So, the Star Trek episode that I want to relate this to, this is Star Trek The Next Generation, season 4, episode 21. It's called The Drumhead. And this is basically, this isn't really the main theme of this episode, um, but it's related. There's something that really stood out to me. The reason why I'm even bringing up Star Trek is because I'm auditing a very interesting class. It's I'm gonna pitch the University of Hawaii here. I'm actually auditing a class called the Psychology of Star Trek, and it's very interesting. Um, and so I was given permission to attend this class, and I don't have any homework other than watching the episode and participating in discussions, or I'm invited to participate in discussions. So it's a lot of fun. A little synopsis, a little bit of a spoiler here. If you wanted to watch this episode, I'm going to try not to say too much, but it's basically the whole context of this episode is there's a it opens with a Klingon who is doing some spying and he's caught in it. And then there's a related incident that happens with an explosion in the engine room that may or may not be related to him. And then there's a crew member who has a certain background, a certain racial background, or let's say race in terms of like an alien race. So, and what's up with his background? Because the question has to do with the Romulans, who, if you're not a Trekkie, I hope this isn't totally going over your head or disinteresting you. Disinteresting you. I'm probably not using the correct word there, but there's actually something really interesting in this whole scenario. So basically, the Romulans are the enemy of the Federation of Planets in the Star Trek universe at this time. So it's basically it's basically like fear of the other. Okay, that's what's going on. I think it's very relevant to today. That's the whole theme of. That's really the predominant theme of this episode. But that's not really what I want to focus on. There's a character, Admiral Sati, a retired admiral who comes out of retirement to address this situation because it has to do with these enemies of the Federation and this potential spy, etc. And she is very controlled by fear. She's just very, she's just acting out of fear of what's going to happen if these people, these enemies, get some kind of foothold, in their Federation of Planets, trying to protect the integrity of their. I guess we would call the parallel for today. I would say would be like, country, like country and nations. Okay, as if the United States were worried about its security. Okay, the integrity of the country. So that's kind of what's going on. I love how sci-fi is able to make commentary on current events and culture. It's presented far in the future. It's presented this familiar yet unfamiliar kind of imaginary future, where I think sci-fi can make a lot of commentary safely, successfully. It's pretty amazing. That's one of the things I like about sci-fi. So this admiral comes in really kind of on a witch hunt after this crew member and this Klingon. So that's really the backdrop, and then Picard. If anyone's familiar with Star Trek, Picard is just a man of conscience, and he's wrestling as he always does in these episodes with what's right, what's wrong, and how to lead and what to do. But in terms of checking yourself, no capping. Maybe you're wondering what that means. Cap means it's well, I'll say new slang. It's actually not, but I'll explain. New slang. Cap just means it's true. No cap means it's a lie. So capping would be, telling the truth, or like, telling the truth or being honest. Okay.
Hey Pops, cap means lie, and no cap means not a lie.
Oh my gosh. You're right. I made a mistake. And so, for those who might think I'm trying to, I'm an older guy trying to trying to use younger people's lingo, it actually goes back to the 70s, a lot in the rap culture, and then it goes back to, if my understanding is correct, to the early 1900s, African American culture, where there was kind of a melding of African culture with American, or some European culture, where there's kind of like some trading of insults, like in kind of a formal trading of insults, but then transformed to this American style. The modern maybe relative of that would be the yo mama joke, okay? So where you're trying to top the next person, but these are not true observations about the other person's mother, so they're not true. And that's really kind of where this whole idea of cap meaning a lie comes from. So and no cap meaning is true or honest. So there we go. So I'm actually using a term which goes even further back to the 1500s, when people would try to top one another. So I think there's a good synonym, like I got a cap, it's on top. So it's like, hey, top that, and it's this sort of competition about who can quote a more relevant or insightful scripture or proverb or something about a situation, trying to outdo the other person, which can lead to exaggeration. So that's where this whole thing comes from. All right, so back to just sharing a little education of my own from recent. All right, so back to this Star Trek episode. There were a couple moments. So I think, like, to me, some great examples in this episode of somebody who's able to do an honest self-evaluation is Captain Picard. The Admiral sits down with him, and she's like, well, these hypothetical situations, well, what if your half-betazoid counselor told you that this person couldn't be trusted? Because Picard didn't want his crew member to be treated like a criminal when he wasn't proven guilty. But the Admiral was trying to, on this witch hunt, so she was doing that to his crew member. So she said, well, what would you do if your, half-betazoid counselor told you that this person couldn't be trusted? Wouldn't you put restrictions on him and that sort of thing? And he said, yeah, I probably would. But perhaps I should reevaluate that behavior. So here's a character who's blinded by her paranoia, and she's not willing to the very end to admit maybe she's wrong, maybe she's gone too far. She even resorted to deceit and bullying and intimidation and that sort of thing. And isn't that what we do when we can't admit maybe we're wrong and we're just dead set on this course of action based on this presumption that we're right? We resort to tactics that really go hand in hand with the inability to be honest. We use less than honest means, and that's what she does. But here's Picard saying, yeah, I might just do that very same thing as you, but then he's able to. He has the ability to check himself honestly and say, maybe I should reevaluate that. He's saying, yeah, that doesn't sound right. I think I would be wrong to do that, to treat somebody, to rush to judgment about somebody and treat them as if they're guilty without proof. So there's another example, which is Worf. So Worf is the security chief here on the Enterprise, and he gets sucked into this whole thing. I think it's a good parallel to how people can fall under an authority and be kind of sucked into a maybe a very charismatic leader's wake and go along with this whole thing, what that charismatic leader is trying to accomplish, and just be convinced, just trust that that's right. But so Worf was, falling into this whole trap about, trying to dig up dirt on this crew member, and I mean, just really, really on a mission, kind of to find fault with him before they could really prove he was guilty of the things that he was being under suspicion for. So at the end of the episode, this is a little giveaway, but he says to Captain Picard, he says, "I believed her. I helped her. I did not see what she was." And so here's somebody who's able to admit not only was he wrong, he was fooled, he's able to admit his actions are wrong. His participation was wrong. And how often, the reason I bring all this up is how often do we see that? Influential people. It could be a politician. It could be a parent, actually. There's that, or a spouse, perhaps. There's that stereotypical or perhaps caricatured spouse who just cannot admit they're wrong. Well, I have had people in my life like that who other family members would kind of half-heartedly joke about, because it really wasn't funny, about a family member who just could not admit that they were wrong. And that hurts everybody around them. It hurts family, it hurts friends. So it could be a spouse, it could be a parent. I wonder how many of us who might be watching this are parents, and maybe we haven't been able to admit to our kids that we've made mistakes in our relationship with them, that we've made mistakes as parents, that we made mistakes in their lives that perhaps have hurt them. How many of us are able to apologize, admit that, ask for forgiveness? And here's where we really get to the heart of the matter. Why? Why do we have a hard time sometimes being honest in our assessment of ourselves? To check ourselves, no capping. All right, use that with your kids. All right, no cap. Try that. They may just give you a sideways glance or roll their eyes. Fear. As a parent, I've definitely struggled with that. Like, oh my gosh, if I admit this mistake, they're not going to look up to me anymore. They're not going to respect me. They're not going to trust me. And as a matter of fact, I mean, there may be some extreme examples, or maybe you should just talk to somebody else about it. But for the most part, kids can smell hypocrisy and insincerity, and pride, and I mean, we all can in a sense, but you know, kids, yeah, they just, even if maybe they're not fully conscious of it, there's a vibe, right? They can tell something's wrong, and so admitting our mistakes actually can lead to a lot of to a deeper trust, to closeness, um, because look, we're obviously we obviously all make mistakes, and so if we act like we haven't made a mistake, well, clearly uh, there's an inability. There's an inability for. I mean, why would somebody trust you if you're not willing to own your mistakes? That's a dangerous relationship. Um, the other thing is power. So here's this admirals actually in the Star Trek fantasy universe. They don't call them admirals in Star Trek. They're usually always like really bad people, so they're called badmirals. So this retired badmiral Sati, she was definitely controlled by fear. She's very paranoid. But the other thing is power, and I want to share a little quote from the episode. She says she's talking to Captain Picard kind of early, and she's kind of at the point where she's like, I like to work alone, but I feel like I could partner with you in this, um, effort to root out this traitor or whatever. And she says she's talking about her father and how her father raised her, and her father was this great judge. And she shares about how she grew up with her and her brothers at the dinner table, um, arguing their cases like lawyers in court. And her father, she said, Father loved it when I nailed one of my brothers with some subtle point of logic. And you can see in her this almost joy about defeating her brothers. This love of having power over other people. As my friend Mike pointed out, often that's just a cover, a compensation for insecurity. This kind of relishing in winning, defeating other people. So that's the other thing, is fear is the enemy of honest self-assessment, and the love of power is the enemy of honest self-assessment. Now, together, fear and power, when people are controlled by these two, one of the outcomes of that is gaslighting. I made a video about that. I also made a video about not being afraid, so you might want to check those out. So, I am a Christian. I've shared this many times. I do believe in God and the Bible, and there's a passage in a letter by Paul, and he says to the Christians, he appeals to them to make a sober estimate of themselves. And here's a man who is very willing to assess himself. This man, Paul, formerly known as Saul, he was actually an enemy of Christianity. He was an up and coming partisan Jewish religious leader, being mentored by probably the most respected leader of the day, Gamaliel. Here's Saul of Tarsus, and he was hunting down Christians to arrest them and put in jail, with the implication that would be tried and perhaps killed. Well, he becomes a Christian. And this man in the book of Philippians, he's able to say, all these things that I used to take pride in, that I thought made me important, that I valued, I was wrong. My bloodline, my position, my um, my mission that I was on. He's able to say, yeah, I was wrong about all those things. That's not really what's important. And he, because it was his relationship with God through Jesus Christ that became of not just the utmost, but really the only importance to him in the end. And he went from hunting down Christians to being hunted as a Christian. That's how radically he transformed. So I wonder how many of us are able to honestly assess ourselves. Well, if we're having trouble, let's take a look at these two things. What about fear? Are we afraid of what we'll see if we take an honest look at ourselves? Are we afraid of what's going to happen when we admit what we see to other people? And the other side of it is, are we maybe a little bit of control freak? Maybe we're holding on to power in a relationship. Maybe we have a hard time being willing to lose an argument, to um, to look like a failure. And I'll have to make a video about that, about learning from failure in the future. But that's it. So check yourself. No capping. How you doing?